Hey friends, welcome to the PAULCAST. My name is Paul Doherty, and I can't wait to share with you the word God put on my heart for you today. We're going to be talking about discipleship, having a growth mindset, handling hard seasons while you are waiting on a dream to come to pass, a prayer to come to pass, and handling it with a patient attitude. So make sure that you stay tuned for this whole podcast because there's a few things I want to share with you at the very end on ways that you can continue to help me get this podcast out there. All right, let's talk a little bit about patience. We see in the scriptures, oftentimes patience is referred to as a fruit in following God, a fruit of the Spirit, right? I was at the grocery store the other day and I was walking past these fruit trees that were on sale. And I started talking to the person in the grocery store. I said, is this the right season to be planting fruit trees? Y'all are selling fruit trees in the middle of February. And she said, it's not the right season to plant them, but you can take them in your house, keep them watered, and in March, you could put them in the ground. As long as they're planted in good soil and they have the water and they have the sunlight, eventually over time, they will bear fruit. And I think it's the same way with the fruit of the Spirit. In Galatians 5, verse 22, it says, but the Holy Spirit produces in you fruit of patience, kindness, gentleness, self-control. I used to always think that patience was something that you got as soon as you decided to follow Jesus, that you were now living with the fruit of the Spirit. And I was like, man, do I need to get saved again? Because I feel like I am struggling with my fruit. And then I started reading more and I realized this is a process, that patience is developed and cultivated over time in the same way that an apple tree, and I'm a tree planter, in the same way that an apple tree doesn't have apples in its first year, it takes a while before apple trees eventually produce apples. I planted, in the last 7 years, I have planted, no joke, 5,000 trees. I'm a big tree planter, and I do it on my off days. And I can plant, these are baby trees. I'm not planting massive trees. I'm talking like 12-inch to 14-inch, sometimes a 3-4 footer tree. But when I plant these in the ground, I know it's going to take time for these to grow. And if they're fruit trees, it's going to take some years before they begin to produce peaches, apples, pears, oranges. It doesn't happen overnight. The same goes for you. And I think about having a growth mindset means I'm committed to the process. I'm going to keep growing no matter how long it takes. So I was thinking this last month about how long it took for me to get where I am today and how long it's going to take me to get to where I want to be next year and the next 5 years, 10 years. And it takes time. I'm raising 5 kids, right? And I'm teaching them the importance of patient endurance, sticking with the process. Just because you practice basketball doesn't mean the next game you're going to score 20 points, that you're going to be just like, your favorite athlete out there overnight. It takes time. My kids get frustrated. They go to practice and then they go to speed and agility practice. Then they go to PE class. They have drills, right? They're stretching, and yet they're still not successful yet to their, desire on the sports field. And I tell them, stick with it. Over time, if you keep on working, you keep on training, you keep on practicing, you keep on staying planted, you will eventually see results. So, cool story. I was at one of my kids' sports games this past week, and this is one of the kids that has at times struggled to see the results he wants to see in this sport. He's worked really hard, he's trained, he's been at practice, and he gets frustrated because other kids have maybe a little bit more of an athletic build and natural ability with their body to just, do whatever with that sport, and he has to work harder. And he's one of these kids that's very determined. He'll get up early in the morning. He's the kid that's like, Dad, I want to go to the gym at 6 a.m., go work out. Well, cool thing is, after a year of hard work this last week, he scored in the basketball game under pressure, hit a free throw, and I was so proud of him. I posted on social media, and I started thinking about how God sees us. God looks at you and I, and he's like, look, you're in a process. If you will stick with this, God is cheering you on. As your Father in heaven, he wants to see you succeed. He's not trying to hold back any of the desires in your heart of where you want to, maybe you want to get married, maybe you want to have kids, maybe you want to lead a successful church someday, maybe you want to start a company, maybe you want to be a phenomenal mom or dad. Stick with the training, stick with the constant patient endurance of, whatever it requires. God is up in heaven and he is cheering you on. And there will come a day where you see the rewards of your effort. I think about the story of Job, right? Job in the Bible had to endure painful things. He wasn't going to basketball practice. This guy was going through the most painful season of his life, and he had to stick with it. And the Bible teaches us to have patience like Job, to have a endurance mindset, to have this fruit of the Spirit, right, that the Holy Spirit produces of long suffering when we are walking through trials that aren't easy. And maybe you find yourself like Job, where you are walking through loss and pain, and you're not where you want to be, and things that you thought would be in your life are no longer in your life, and you are like, God, I need your grace right now. I need your strength to just stick with it. Job patiently endured, and in the end of his life, he got double for the trouble. He got a reward on the other side of his long suffering, his patience. So my question for you today is, how is your patience right now in life? How is your patience with the current circumstances you're facing? By the way, patience is not just waiting until things get better in your life, waiting until you finally, get that thing you've been praying for, waiting until you finally fulfill that dream or that prayer gets answered. I used to think that patience was like learning how to wait for what I want so that I can get what I want, and eventually I don't have to wait anymore with a patient attitude. But that's not really what patience is. Patience is having a good attitude while you're waiting for what you are hoping for. So like when I was single and I was praying and hoping one day I'm going to get married, one day I'm going to meet the right girl, one day we're going to have an awesome marriage. Patience is not just waiting to get married. Patience is having a good attitude while I'm waiting. And then once I'm married, having patience with my spouse, and having patience on the dreams that my spouse and I have, and having patience on the prayers that we're praying that aren't. Like, patience is a lifelong journey. It's not just I have to have patience for this season and then I don't. No, you have to have patience for the rest of your life. And it is a constant battle of asking the Holy Spirit, Lord, produce in me patience. God, help me to grow in patience. I want to give you just a quick definition of what patience means. It means practicing self-control over your attitude to endure hard seasons, waiting seasons, with an even-tempered attitude, a steady spirit, an ability to stay positive during negative circumstances. Patience is not just being nice until you get what you want. Patience is having a good attitude even when you don't get what you want. Patience is trusting God that even if what you prayed for doesn't get answered, God knows what's best. Patience is learning to enjoy the season you're in, even if it's not the season you picked, and making the most of what you have at your disposal. Two basic words for patience in the Greek are hupomone, which means to persist, to wait, to endure under pressure, to not give up, to not throw in the towel. And the other Greek word is makrothumio, which means long suffering, the will to wait, the will to wait. I was at a restaurant a while back, and I couldn't wait to be seated. I was like so hungry, hadn't eaten for 8 hours, right? I tell my wife, I'm like, we've got to go get a table. There's 3 open tables over there. We had been waiting 40 minutes, and I just couldn't wait to be seated. And she says, Paul, just be patient. The sign says, please wait to be seated until a server comes to get you. And I was like, you know what? The violent take it by force. I am going to get this table. I walk over there. She's praying. She's like, Lord, help my husband be patient. Help me be patient with my husband. And I'm about to sit down at this table. And I'm like, don't worry, babe. I got this. You can wait till the server comes to get you. I'm gonna go and stake claim of that table for us. And right as I'm about to sit down, this waitress stops me. She says, stop! If you sit down, you're going to inherit the mess that was left behind that you don't see. You're about to sit down in someone's ketchup and ranch. I said, I didn't even see that. She goes, well, if you just would have waited, then you wouldn't have to worry about having to almost sit in someone else's mess. She says, just trust that we are going to clean this table. And when it's time for you to be seated, you'll be seated. And I learned an important lesson in that moment, that oftentimes we are trying to rush into, whether it's relationships with a guy or girl, thinking, well, Paul, they're single, the table's open, I can sit down, or even a position, a promotion, an opportunity, a dream, launching a ministry, launching a business before it's time yet. And maybe God's like, hey, I am healing you in some areas. I am cleaning you in some areas. I'm cleaning them. Before you sit down, Trust that I'm going to get you when it's the right time. And if it's not the right time, you don't want to rush this because you'll take on a mess that was left behind by their ex-husband, their ex-wife, whatever that is. I was talking with someone even this last week after church, and they said, Paul, I wish I would have heard a message on patience like this 4 years ago. I married someone who was still carrying the baggage of their previous pain that they had walked through in a previous marriage, and I thought I could help them. They had walked through heartbreak, they had walked through pain, they had walked through verbal abuse, and I came in thinking I would be their sweeping savior of a relationship, and I would be the one to help heal them and put them back together and fix the trauma they had walked through. And instead, I reaped the consequences and the aftermath of the unhealed, uncleaned table that I sat down in too soon. And they said, tragically, our marriage ended. And they said it was painful. They said, I had people in my life telling me, let this person get healed. Let this person get restored. Let this person go through some classes to get their heart right. Don't sit down at this table yet. Just because they're single, just because the table's open, doesn't mean it's clean yet. And I would say the same goes maybe for you. Maybe you're in a season where you're waiting on some stuff and you want to rush it and you want to skip the process. This is what Paul says in Ephesians 4, verse 2. He says, be patient always. And he says, be patient with people. Be patient with the process of people. Be patient with relationships. Don't be in a rush to speed things up. Don't be in a rush to take things to that next level just because you're hungry, right? I was hungry and I wanted to sit down. I was like, I am ready to eat. I'm ready to go to this restaurant. I am ready to order an appetizer. Hunger doesn't mean that timing is right. So just because you have a desire for sex doesn't mean you're supposed to get married right now. Just because you guys slept together and you got a baby coming doesn't mean you're supposed to tie the knot yet. You might need to go through counseling. You might need to go through some healing classes. You might need to go through some restoration. And you may not like what I'm saying, but it's true. Patience could save you heartbreak. Patience could save you painful seasons of your life that you would have to endure because of rushing something that wasn't ready yet. Patience comes to our lives when we begin to trust that our Father knows what's best. I took my kids to the donut shop recently and they were just shouting, donut, donut, we want donuts, dun-duns, dun-duns. And I was like, guys, calm down, be patient, just wait, we will get donuts. They were literally about to break through the glass window to grab those glazed donuts and those donut holes. And I was like, guys, chill out. You will get donuts. You're acting like you've never eaten before. Where have we seen that in our own lives? Where we act like we have not eaten in days. We act like we haven't gotten what we've wanted and we're going to die if we don't get what think about Esau, right? Esau was starving in the Bible. And he was so hungry that he sold his birthright for a bowl of soup. The Bible says that he actually said these words. He says, I can't live another second without that bowl of soup. I have to have it and I have to have it now. His impatient attitude cost him his inheritance. His impatient, impulsive attitude cost him his identity. What are you selling for a bowl of soup? What are you compromising because you can't wait to have sex? What are you, where are you in your life going, man, I got to have it and I got to have it now. And if I don't get it now, I'm going to throw a fit. Where are you allowing impatience to ruin relationships, to ruin seasons of your life? And listen, I know it's not easy, but we need this. And you go, Paul, I want to be patient. I just don't know how. So let me talk to you about how. James chapter 1 talks about spiritual maturity. And James was a half-brother of Jesus. So if anyone knows about spiritual maturity, it's the guy that grew up with a brother named Jesus, and his mom was always telling him, I wish you would be more like your brother Jesus, right? And James learned how to follow Jesus and grow spiritually into who God had called him to be. So James chapter 1, he's talking about spiritual immaturity and spiritual maturity. And one of the differences that he brings is patience. He says in verse 3, he says, you know that when you walk through tests and trials, when you go through hard seasons, Job, when you're tempted, Esau, when you feel frustrated, Rebecca, when you feel overwhelmed, Hannah, when you're dealing with jealousy, Paul, when you're dealing with insecurity and you want something that someone else has and you want it now, and you want that thing that you're craving, and you're going through trials and seasons of discontentment and disappointment and can't wait to get where when you're going through that, he says, listen, that's an opportunity for your patience to grow. Your patience actually grows the more you say no. The more you say no to your flesh, the more your patience grows. And we always feel like we have to say yes to our flesh. Like if I want a donut, I'm going to give myself a donut. If I want a quarter pounder bacon cheeseburger from McDonald's at midnight, I'm going to give myself a quarter. No, you don't have to always say yes to your flesh. The more you say yes to your flesh, the more your patience shrinks. But the more you say no to yourself, the more your patience grows. He says in those tests and those trials, your patience has a chance to grow. So let it grow. Anna and Elsa from Frozen, they sing, let it go. I'm going to sing, let it grow. Let your patience grow. When your patience is fully developed, when your endurance, your long suffering, your forbearance, your ability to handle hard, long seasons of not getting what you want, when you go through those seasons and you are patient, you become spiritually mature and you lack nothing. A patient person is almost like an unstoppable person. A patient person who has mastered the art of no to themselves is literally like stronger than a warrior. In fact, Proverbs says this. In Proverbs 16, verse 32, it says, better a patient person than a warrior. Better a woman with self-control than a man who can take over a city. Think about that. The Roman Empire crashed because they were literally bloodthirsty for more land, more territory, taking over more cities. Like it was never enough land, never enough for the Roman Empire. They wanted more power, more control, more conquering, and they lost it all. They lost everything. Just because you're a warrior doesn't mean you're smart. Just because you have big muscles doesn't mean you're a strong person. Just because you could take over a city doesn't mean you're going to keep the city. The Roman Empire took over many cities and they lost it all. In fact, the Proverbs says patience is more important than strength. A patient person actually has more power than a man with muscles. Patient people actually have the ability to take over cities and actually keep those cities. This is what another proverb says, good things come to those who wait. If you can wait for it, and if you can wait with the right attitude, we're all going to wait on things. The American life is promised 78.2 years. That's kind of what scientists have studied, how long we're going to live. My grand just celebrated 101 years old. I claim those genes on my life. But for the majority of us, 78.2 years is what we're promised. And I hope we all live longer than that. But they say 14 of the 78 years we will spend waiting on things, waiting in traffic, waiting at airports, waiting on planes, waiting in lines at a grocery store, waiting in lines at a theme park, waiting on hold on phones, waiting on a woman, waiting on a man, waiting on a promotion, waiting on a relationship to turn around, waiting for people, like waiting for friends. And the question is not will we wait? The question is how will we wait? So I told you I was going to talk a little bit about discipleship. And here's where I want to bring in discipleship. Who you listen to, who you surround yourself with, is going to have a massive effect on patience growing in your life, on the fruits of the Spirit being cultivated in your life. Show me your friends and I'll show you your future. If you hang out with impulsive people, you will become impulsive. If you hang out with impatient people, you will become impatient. If you hang around people who don't want to go to church, don't want to study the Word of God, don't want to hear what God has to say for their lives, eventually that will rub off on you. If you hang around people that make foolish decisions, you eventually will make foolish decisions. This is like Discipleship 101. Surround yourself with people that are going to sharpen you. Proverbs says, as iron sharpens iron, so another person sharpens another person. Discipleship is not just, a once a week Bible study group that you have with 4 people. It's not just a, program you go through for 12 weeks of, I went through discipleship and I'm done. Discipleship is a lifelong journey of listening to voices, surrounding yourself with people, being in an environment, being planted like a fruit tree in a good soil next to a river that will bear fruit even in your old age. You can't grow into who God's called you to be without surrounding yourself with people that are going to help you become who God's called you to be. So you need the right voices. You need the right environment. You need to be planted somewhere. I was meeting today with a group of young adults, and I said, I am so grateful you have chosen to plant yourself in this church. Let me tell you, being planted somewhere doesn't mean you won't face opportunities to leave, to give up on relationships, to get offended at people, to get frustrated, to uproot yourself and say, I don't like where I'm planted. I want to plant myself somewhere else. And there are seasons where God may move you. He may transition you. But if you are always uprooting yourself every year to a new church, to a new environment, to new friends, and you're not allowing yourself to grow and stay planted somewhere, you'll never bear the fruit God wants you to bear. Most of discipleship is just staying rooted in the same place with the same group of people in the same environment. And it sounds monotonous, but on the other side of that is fruit, consistency, the growth of patience, the growth of gentleness, kindness. It's easy to be gentle with people that you have no relationship with. It's hard to be gentle with people that you have to see every single day, and you get offended at them and you get frustrated with them and you don't want to be around them. That's where patience and the fruits of the Spirit are really tested. In Colossians 3, verse 12, Paul the Apostle says, clothe yourselves in patience with each other. Clothe yourselves in grace towards each other. So every day we need to wake up and go, Lord, how can I put on an invisible shirt or hat that helps me be reminded that I need to treat people with patience. I need to treat people with kindness. I need to be gentle with people, that I am a Christian, that I am wearing an invisible outfit today that says, I want to show people Jesus. And so some practical tools that can help you be patient with people is when you're tempted to be rude, when you're tempted to react, when you're tempted to be sharp with someone, when you're tempted to be impatient and impulsive, pause. Just pause. Just take a deep breath. Just pause. And in that pause, wait a second, right? When I was watching Daniel the Tiger with my kids a lot growing up, we have 5 kids, if I haven't told you, and they've all watched Daniel the Tiger. And it's a cartoon, I think, off of Mr. Rogers maybe. And there's this moment where Daniel the Tiger says, when you get really mad and you want to roar, just count to 4, right? He's like 1, 2, 3, 4. And as he counts and he pauses, he chooses not to react. And it sounds super childish. And you're like, that's a kid show. But I have found that if I will pause before I text, before I post, before I send that email, before I snap at someone who's making me want to snap, if I will just pause and just hold my tongue, just pause. Number 2, pray. Practical tools to be patient. When you want to be impatient with people, when you're frustrated, just pray. Pray over people. Pray over that situation. Pray over the thing that you're tempted to be impatient about. We would judge less if we prayed for people more. If we just prayed for that person that's causing us to be frustrated, pray for that situation, pray over that promotion, pray over that opportunity, pray over that thing that you're wishing was happening, right? Just pray. When you're tempted to be impatient with people, number 3, put yourself in their shoes. Remember that you have bad days too. Remember that you walk through hard seasons too. I'll never forget going to this conference in 2010 where I was so excited to meet this pastor that I really admired. He was like a hero of mine. Looked up to this guy, listened to his podcast, read his books. I could not wait to meet this guy. He was speaking at this conference, multiple sessions. So after his last session, I waited in line for an hour to meet this guy. I was like so pumped. I was overthinking it in my head. In fact, in my mind, I was like, this guy's my best friend. We'd never met before, but I knew his voice. I knew his stories. I knew his family. Like this guy talked about everything in his sermons. And so I was so excited to be like, yo, my best friend. I had my phone ready, wanted to take a picture with him. And I'd been waiting in line. It had been an hour. Other people were talking to him. Finally, I get up there. And guys, this was one of the most painful moments. I felt so sad. I was like, yo. And he was like, yes. And I was like, you are amazing. I am so excited to meet you. I follow you and I've been reading all your books and listening to your podcast. And he just looks at me and he's just staring at me as I'm like, trying to figure out what I'm saying, and I'm making a mess of my words. And he goes, "What can I do for you?" And I was like, ouch. That felt like, I don't know why. I wanted him to be like, "Bro, you're my best friend." I wanted him to give me a hug and be like, "My lifelong buddy, let's hang out. Here's my phone number." And his first thing was to me like, "What can I do for you?" And I was like, "Would you take a picture with me?" He goes, "I'm in a real hurry. I got to go." And I was like, "Okay." And he goes, "Is there anything else I could do for you?" I was like, just know that I'm a big fan." And I'm like tripping on my words. He goes, "Okay, I got to go." And just walks off. And guys, I was so mad. I was like, I am canceling this guy. I'm never listening to this guy again. I was so mad at him, right? I was so upset. And then 2 months later, I found out his dad was dying of cancer in the hospital. And he was rushing to leave the conference to go and be by his dad's bedside. Here I was treating him with no grace, impatient, upset. I waited an hour. I wanted to talk to him, right? Judging this pastor. He was a big deal. And in my mind, I was like, he blew me off. He thinks he's somebody. He's not. And once I found out that he was actually rushing to go see his dad, it changed my perspective. And I was like, man, I need to give him grace. And I told my wife about it because she was like, she could tell I was really hurt by it. That night, I didn't even sleep good. The night that he blew me off, I was so sad. I felt so rejected. And I was like, I'm never talking to that guy again. If I ever become big time, I'm never going to talk to that guy again. And she goes, "Paul, you really need to give him grace. You don't know what's going on." And sure enough, 2 months later, I find out his father was battling cancer and he was rushing home. He had spoken all week and he went to go and see his dad. And that same year, his dad passed away. And I realized, man, everybody needs grace. Put yourself in someone else's shoes. When you feel blown off by somebody, when you feel like somebody's rude to you, when you feel like somebody didn't give you the time of day that you wanted, just give grace. Be patient with people. We all need grace. I need grace. You need grace. Just think about this. As you're growing in the fruits of the Spirit, remember other people are growing in the fruits of the Spirit. Pastors, leaders, people you admire, and they need the same grace that God gave you for you to give to them. Let's talk about, just for a moment here in this podcast, I want to talk about what patience can do in your life if you will really take this message and hone it in. Guys, I'm telling you right now, if you nail patience, you're unstoppable. If you get this down and you really make this fruit of the Spirit something you're going to go after this year, the sky is the limit on what God can do. We overestimate what we could get done in a week, what we could get done in a year, and we underestimate what we could get done in a lifetime. If I give myself the grace to go, you know what? It may not all happen in my first year as pastor. It may not all happen in my 20s. It may not all happen in my 30s. But in my lifetime, I am going to accomplish a ton of things for God and for the glory of God and the dreams that He has placed in my heart. Stop constantly giving God due dates on when He has to do stuff for you. Just say, "God, if you want to do it, I trust you're going to do it in my lifetime. And it's going to be beautiful. And it's going to bring glory to you." If you can nail patience, I promise you, the sky is the limit. Number one, patience is essential to a life of obedience. If you're going to obey God, you got to be patient. If you're going to obey God, you have to be patient. Abraham struggled with patience. Noah, thankfully, he had patience. Over 100 years, he worked on that ark. Between when God told him rain was coming and rain actually came, it was a century. You're complaining because your Wi-Fi won't work for 10 minutes? Noah had to wait 100 years while working with his family outside on an ark. We complain because we have to work outside for one day. We complain because we don't get a paycheck on time. We complain over so many things. And when you look in the Bible, so many of these people that obeyed God, they had some really good patience. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, right? And then the list goes on. Joseph. When I think about the story of Joseph, waiting while he was in the dungeon, waiting while he was accused of a crime he didn't commit, waiting while his brothers threw him in a pit, sold him as a slave, waiting. And through that waiting, through that patient endurance, he was obeying God. Number two, patience is vital in every good relationship. There's no good relationships out there where people aren't practicing patience. If you see a good relationship, somebody's sacrificing. Somebody's forgiving somebody. Somebody's practicing patience. I was talking with a guy the other day and he was like, dude, my parents rarely have a fight. Rarely. He's like, I've watched them for 40 years. This guy's, he's my age. And he's like, for 40 years, I've seen their marriage. And he's like, I've hardly ever seen them fight. But he said, it's not because my dad is not an argumentative person. He said, it's because my mom is a very patient woman. And she is very graceful and very gentle and very forgiving and very patient. And he said, because of her patience, she chooses not to entertain his argumentative spirit. And I thought that was really funny. He's like, it's not because my dad is this super chill, gentle, patient man. It's because my mom is a saint, right? If you see a good relationship, if you see a relationship where things seem to be working, one of them is practicing patience. Maybe not both, but one of them is choosing to overlook the other person's rudeness, opinionated attitude, nonstop chatterbox, whatever it is. Somebody's practicing patience. Number 3, patience gains respect from other people who are watching your life play out. I was sharing this with our Bible college, how my dad's life of patient, paying the bills, financial integrity, doing things debt-free as a church. We used to be in debt as a church before I was born. In 1985, my dad got our church out of debt. He prayed and asked the church to come together and say, hey, we're going to get out of debt and we're going to stay out of debt. And from this day on, we will never borrow money from a bank and we will never build anything that we don't have the money in hand, cash in hand to build. Well, that was his conviction. And because he followed that conviction, we stayed debt-free all the way until he built the building that I'm sitting in. Or actually, not the building I'm sitting in right now, but the building that we meet in for church. It took 25 years for us to build that building that we meet in every Sunday for church, that auditorium. We didn't open that until 2007. He had the dream to open that in 1982. So from 1982 to 2007, my dad did not act on a prayer, a dream, and a blueprint. He literally already had an architect draw up the blueprints in 1982 to build that building, but he chose, we're going to hold off until we have the cash to do it. Finally, the day came where we had enough money. We had rented as a church. We were a mobile church for 26 years, and we finally built that building in 2007. And today, that same debt freedom, building on a cash basis, has remained in our church. I carry that same conviction. And now the room that I'm sitting in today, this was built during COVID. This was our next generation building and church offices. And we built it patiently, paying off our bills, saving up money, casting vision, the church coming together. And it gave people a chance to give with faith. People who, I was talking with our executive director of the Tulsa Dream Center. He said, I grew up in a church in Birmingham that borrowed from the bank for everything. If we wanted to build something, we built it right away because we would go to the bank and we would borrow $4 million. And we would say, we'll pay this off over time. And what would happen is interest would build up, the money would build up, and then we would have a much bigger thing to pay off than just what we borrowed. And he said, when I came to Victory and I found Victory practicing debt freedom, building on a cash basis, he said, I've never seen this before. And he said it gave him a chance to stretch his own faith and to see his finances grow and to see God increase his prosperity. This is what I'm saying. If you will stay patient and if you will keep on focusing on what God's called you to do, it will gain respect from others and it will inspire others to practice patience in their own life. Fourthly, patience is a strong form of protection. Protection from something too soon. If God's saying no right now, trust that he knows what's best. Just like I told my kids, you're going to eat donuts, but you're not going to eat them right now, right? I'm going to get you what you hope for and what you desire, but I'm not going to let you eat it in the car because you're going to make a mess in the car. You want it right now, but if you get it too soon, you'll make a mess of it. My son was watching me shave the other day and he was like, Dad, I really want that, razor. And I'm like, you're 6 years old. There's no reason for you to be shaving right now. You won't know what to do with this. Besides, you might hurt yourself because you don't know how to use it. One day he will use it. I'm not saying no forever. I'm saying no for now. Don't take a no for now as if it's a no forever. God's not saying, hey, you'll never get married or you'll never have kids or you'll never be a pastor, or you'll never get that promotion, or you'll never write a book, or you'll never, accomplish that dream, whatever that is, own a house, build a house, all the things that are in your heart. God might be saying no right now because he's saying, I need to teach you how to save money. I need to teach you how to be content as a single person. I need to teach you how to grow in this area in your life before you step into that role. Whatever it is, trust that God's protecting you. Here's the truth. When my son asked me for that razor, I thought about when I was a kid, I watched my dad shave. And I asked my dad for his razor and he didn't give it to me. And I snuck into the bathroom and I took my dad's razor and I started trying to shave as a 6-year-old. And I cut my cheek and then I shaved my eyebrow. And I actually shaved half of my eyebrow. I don't know if you can see it. It's one of these eyebrows. And there's still literally like a little bald spot on one of my eyebrows from shaving that when I was 6 years old. So I was thinking in my mind, I was like, I did this to my dad too. And I was telling my son, I'm trying to protect you from unnecessary consequences, unnecessary results that you're not wanting. Number 5, patience values timing in decision-making. There is a timing to everything. Ecclesiastes 4 says there is a timing for everything under the sun, a time to have war and a time to have peace, a time for talking and a time for silence, a time for planting and a time for reaping. Patience values timing, just like trees, just like the fall and the spring and the winter and the summer. Patience understands there's a season for everything. There's a timing for each decision. Maybe this is the right decision, but maybe this isn't the right timing. Number 6, patience is essential in settling disputes. I can think about times where I was upset with people. They were upset with me, and we did not have the right tools to get through that dispute. We did not know what to do to settle that strife in that moment. And we just needed to give each other space. We just need to give each other time. We need to let people cool off. We need to let tempers chill for a second. And over time, it allows people to come back to the table to settle whatever the dispute is. Maybe you're in the middle of a relational, painful moment right now. Be patient with that person. Give them some space and time. Give yourself space and time. That patience is essential to getting to reconciliation. Patience, number 7, patience is essential to persevering in prayer. If you're going to pray for something that's going to take time, you got to have patience to keep persevering. Elijah had to keep praying and keep praying and keep praying. Even after he had prayed multiple times, he had to keep praying, keep trusting that on the other side of praying with persistence and patience and perseverance, eventually God would answer that prayer. So don't give up. Some prayers may not be answered in a week. Some may not be answered in a year. Some may not be answered in a decade. Some may take 25 years, like the church building that we moved into, debt-free. But trust that God is not, he's not ignoring your prayers. Maybe he's encouraging you to keep praying, to stay patient and persevere. Number 8, patience is the key to success in your life. Slow and steady wins the race. The tortoise and the hare, right? That turtle kept on moving one step at a time while the rabbit started off fast and was like, I am going to kill this. I'm going to do this fast. But the tortoise just kept going one step at a time. I think about the story of the wood choppers, right? How this young wood chopper was like, I am in my 20s. I have energy. I have youth. I have vitality. He starts off early in the morning, challenges this old man. He says, listen, I can chop down more trees than you. The old guy said, no, I'll chop more trees than you by the end of the day. So the competition was on, right? The young guy starts off and he chops down like 30 in a few hours, massive trees. And every time he would look over at the old man kept taking breaks. Like every 20 minutes, the old man would sit down, take a break for 10 or 15 minutes, get back up, keep on chopping. And this young guy was like, he is never going to chop down as much as I've chopped down. He's like, I've beat this guy. Like, I know I've beaten this guy. So the young guy around like 3 PM is like, I'm done. I've chopped down more than enough trees. This guy keeps taking breaks. Well, finally at like 5:30 PM, the old man comes over and, person who's like holding the competition counts up how many trees were chopped down. The old guy won. And the young guy was like, no way you won. How in the world did you win? They count up all the trees. They said, the old man won. He beat you. And the young guy said, I saw you taking breaks like every 10 minutes you took a break. And the old man said, what you don't know is every 10 minutes I would stop to sharpen my axe. I would stop to sharpen my blade on my axe. A sharpened blade makes for less hits against a tree. So while you were hitting that tree over and over and over, never taking a break, your axe was getting dull. You might have been working longer. You might have been out there more than I was. You might have been under the sun sweating more than I was, bigger muscles than me, but you chopped less trees because you didn't work smart. His patience paid off because he would sit and he would sharpen the axe. Patience is the key to success in your life. Number 9, patience creates a sense of stability in your life. Our world is unstable. I saw this post on social media just a few weeks ago of a DHS. It was crazy. There was a family that had adopted a child that was a foster child. And apparently it was freezing cold outside, right? It was like 0 degrees, ice and snow outside. Well, this child was screaming, and this adopted family did not like how much this child was screaming. And out of their impatience, locked the child outside in the freezing cold. We're talking like a 4-year-old locked outside, just banging on the door, crying in the freezing cold. And so they called DHS on this, adopted family. They called the cops, and it blew up on social media. A ton of people were like, how in the world is a family allowed to adopt a foster child and treat a foster child like this? And I thought, our world is really messed up. There's a lot of unstable people out there. There's a lot of people reacting to the frustrations of children, to the impulsive, impatient behavior of teenagers. And we've got to be stable. In an unstable world, we've got to practice self-control, right? Like, let it not be said of Christians that we don't know how to handle our kids, that we don't know how to handle our families, that we are overreacting over petty little things and blowing up with a short fuse. I saw some guy had road rage the other day. I saw this on the news. In his road rage, cuts a car off in traffic, a car that maybe made a bad decision in front of him. So he cuts the car off, jumps out of the car with a baseball bat, smashes in all the windows, screaming at the person. People are videoing it on their phones like, this guy's insane, right? Our world has a lot of impatient people, impatient drivers, impatient moms, impatient dads, abusive people, people who lose their tempers every second. Let that not be what's said about Christians. Let us have patience that gives us a stability in an unstable world. Number 10, patience enables us to endure suffering. As much as I want to say that your best days are in front of you, and they are, you will probably have to walk through some hard things too. You'll probably have to walk through some days that it's not easy. And if you can have a patient spirit, I remember sitting in a service where a Holocaust survivor came to our church. And we're talking about the Holocaust in the 40s. Just to be clear, this man was like literally almost 100 years old. He comes to our church and he talks about enduring the Holocaust, being sent as a Jew in Germany to a concentration camp. And he said, the horrors that I experienced, the cries of people that I would hear as they were being sent to the gas chambers and the shooting lines and the amount of starvation that we walked through where they wouldn't feed us for days, the inhumane situations. He said, what gave me the ability to persevere was not optimism. Optimism might get you, enough strength to get through a hard day to stay optimistic, like, well, tomorrow's going to be better. Optimism might be enough to get you through a hard week. Well, next week's going to get better, but optimism won't get you through a hard year. He said, I needed something stronger. I needed the patience of Job. I needed the hope of Abraham. I needed the strength of Isaac. I needed to know that God had not forsaken his Jewish people. So he said, in that concentration camp, I would pray and I would cry and I would talk to God. And he said, I would trust that one day, maybe in a year, maybe in 2 years, maybe in a decade, one day, I would see redemption. And when those American tanks rolled into Germany, when those American soldiers came in and set the Jewish people free in the middle of Hitler's Holocaust and set free those concentration camps, he said it was a remembrance that God still answers prayers. Patience enables us to endure hard, long-suffering seasons. Number 11, patience is essential to peace, joy, and contentment. Philippians chapter 4, Paul says, I've learned the secret to be happy. I've learned peace. I've learned joy. I've learned contentment. And it's not getting what I want. It's not getting all my prayers answered. It's not, having everything go my way. It's not having the most perfect life and the perfect kids and the perfect marriage and the perfect job and the perfect season and the perfect health conditions and the perfect living conditions and the perfect house and the perfect car. No, Paul says it has nothing to do with external things. I've learned the secret to contentment, to peace, and to joy. And he said, it is this. Christ is enough. I can do all things through Christ in me. I can handle all seasons through Christ who strengthens me. Patience only comes when you let Jesus be Lord of your life. So maybe you're walking through some things right now that aren't easy. Surrender to Jesus. Just say, God, give me the patient endurance that you had going through the cross, going through the hard seasons. Help me to have peace and joy and contentment when I am facing situations that seem very discontent, very painful. By the way, you can live in a palace and still be discontent. Like you can have poverty and be the most content person out there. You can also be very wealthy and be very discontent. Money does not buy contentment. Money doesn't buy joy. Money doesn't buy peace. Some of the wealthiest people are some of the most paranoid people. They think at any moment someone might steal their wealth, might jump over the wall, scale through their security systems, get past their, big dogs out in their yard. Some of the wealthiest celebrities are some of the most insecure, afraid, paranoid, miserable people. And you say, how do you know that, Paul? Because I've read enough articles about what they say, and I've listened to interviews. In fact, I was one time on a golf course. I got invited to this random golf tournament in Monterey, California. And I was on a golf course in Carmel. It was called Pebble Beach. It was like this incredible golf course. And I remember talking to one of the caddies there. And he said, you see that house over there? I said, yeah. He said, that's Gene Hackman's house. I said, the actor Gene Hackman? He said, yeah, the actor. And he said, that house over there is Clint Eastwood's house. I was like, what? Clint Eastwood? He said, yeah. He said, over there is Charles Schwab's house. And then Fannie Mae. He was listing all these massive, multi-millionaire, billionaire houses that are worth $40 million. He said, can I tell you something? He said, most of the guys that live on this golf course are miserable as heck. I said, what do you mean? He said, they're just not happy. They're constantly cynical and angry and complaining and cussing me out and cussing out the waiters and waitresses at the restaurant. They are so unhappy. He said they have the nicest cars. They're on their sixth wife, who's had her third face job, her fourth body job. They got all the body parts mixed up and, fixed up, and they've done all this stuff. But he said it's never enough. It's never enough. And I think this is the key. Patience actually helps you to be happy without having to have everything that you want. Number 12, patience allows us to see that God is working. When I was at ORU and I was praying one day for a wife, and I was praying, I was single, I was 22, senior year, and I had been on dates that, we used to set our roommate up on a date, and it was called Get Your Roommate a Date. And so I would go on these Get Your Roommate a Dates probably 2 or 3 times a year, and none of them were working out. I always felt like I got with someone that was like sweet, kind, a good friend, but there was no chemistry. Like it wasn't going to go anywhere. It wasn't like someone that I would date. And so 4 years went by in college, and I was like, God, not that I came to college to find a wife, but I had heard all these stories that, you're going to find your wife at ORU, this Christian university. And I was like, I guess that didn't work for me. And while I was praying and patiently waiting, and maybe not always patient, like I tried to go on dates with people, even though God would be like, I felt in my quiet time when I would pray, the Lord would be like, Paul, you don't have to go on so many dates to figure out who you're going to marry someday. Just trust me. But I was so afraid. I was like, what if I miss out on who I'm supposed to marry because I didn't go on a date with them, And there was this one girl I asked out 7 times. She said no every single time. But every single time that she said no, she would say, ask me again. And I was like, why are you saying no, but then telling me to ask you again? She kept wanting me to ask her out. And it was really sad. This was my sophomore year. And I was like, God, I actually really like this girl. And the more that she tells me no, and then tells me to keep asking her, the more I feel like I'm liking her. She's playing games with me. So finally on Valentine's, I come to her. This is the 7th time. And I was like, hey, I've been asking you on dates now. This is the 7th time. And I said, I just need to know, is there a chance? Like, what are the chances between you and me? She was like, 1 in a million. I was like, so you're telling me there's a chance? That's a Dumb and Dumber line in case you didn't know. But she looked at me, she said, I think we would make really good friends. I said, okay, I'm no longer going to ask you because you keep telling me to ask you and I'm not going to ask you anymore. And she was like, no, you could keep asking me. I was like, no, you just said we would make really good friends. And I remember going to God about this. I was like, God, I feel like my years at ORU, I never found who I was supposed to marry. By the way, that same girl that said no, 2 years later, my senior year, she came to me and asked me out on a date. She said, I'm ready now. I said, I already moved on. I'm a senior now. That was when I was a sophomore. I'm no longer waiting on you. But I remember that senior year, I was serving in our youth group and I was at an outreach and I had been basically just choosing not to go on any more dates. It had kind of been like I was at the end of my 4 years at ORU and I thought, you know what? I'm done trying to find someone to marry. I just want to focus on my job, my purpose, my calling. I was really planted in the church. And even when that girl asked me to go on a date with her, I was like, no, I'm not supposed to keep on trying to go out on dates with anybody. And I remember just leaning into what God was doing. I was serving in this homeless outreach with a guy named Phil Brown. And we would go downtown on Friday nights. We would feed the homeless, sit with them, and just pray with them. And it was so powerful. On one of those outreaches, Ashley shows up. And I remember seeing Ashley, serving with her in this outreach, and I thought, God, maybe I'm supposed to ask Ashley out. I had known Ashley since we were in 2nd grade. I had known her since I was like 6 or 7 years old. And I was like, God, here I've been at ORU this whole time trying to find the one, and yet Ashley's been across the street at Victory, going to Victory Bible College, going through our internship program, serving in the church. She was already working on staff as a youth secretary. And I remember us seeing each other at this outreach, starting to talk a little bit, became good friends again. And then after I graduated, we started dating and eventually we got married. But I realized through that season of just trusting God, and maybe I'm speaking to someone that's listening to this right now, as you are trusting God, being patient, God will show you He's working behind the scenes. Just because you may not see it yet doesn't mean that God's not working on your behalf for someone, for something, for a promotion, for the right person, for the dream in your heart, maybe even for your kids. Whatever it is that you're praying for, trust that patience allows us to trust that God's at work. Patience puts us in a place of saying, okay, God, I'm going to stop trying to control the outcome and I'm going to trust that you're working. And the last point is this: patience is a characteristic of God. So the more I grow in patience, the more I become like God. And the more I become like God, the more I see how God is with me, that God wants me, right? I'm made in the image of God, which means there's already a God factor inside of me. I'm already His child. But the more I can become patient, the more I realize, man, He is so patient with me. The more I practice patience with my kids when they are just getting on my last nerve, the more I see how God is patient with me when I'm getting on His last nerve. When I see my kids spill the milk for the 20th time after I have filled that cup up with milk 20 times and they spill it again, the more I realize God keeps giving me more milk when I spill it. And God is saying, Paul, I'm patient with you. I'm patient in your mess ups. I'm patient in your mistakes. I'm patient in your spiritual maturity, in the sanctification, in the growth. God is patient with us. So as we close out today, let me just tell you, I'm praying for you. I love you. God is patient with you. He's working in you. In the month of March, I'm going to focus on discipleship, and I'm going to really focus in on who or what is discipling you. And who are you discipling in your life, that you would pick a couple of people that God's called you to pour into. So we're going to talk more about that in the next month. I'm going to have some interviews that I think will be very powerful in the topic of discipleship. Thank you for being a part of this podcast. Please share this with friends. Subscribe to it, leave a good review, pass it on to a family member or a friend. Let them know they can come and find some content on the PAULCAST that might be helpful for them, encouraging to their season, beneficial to what they're walking through. We love you so much. Stay tuned for more episodes right here on the PAULCAST.